Erin Miller, Executive Director with Space ISAC. It's a real pleasure to be here in the Watch Center with Space ISAC here in Colorado Springs. And I will say this is also part of the 40th Space Symposium as well here in Colorado Springs. Thank you so much for hosting us today.
Absolutely. Glad to have you.
Now, this is not the first time we've had you on Australia in Space TV, and we'll thank Nicola as well in the lead up to the Space Cyber Forum in Adelaide, being held in June. Maybe introduce us to Space ISAC, and then we might go through, we might even have some overlays potentially on what we're seeing here. But yeah, just what your role is here and what Space ISAC is trying to achieve.
Sure. I'm the Executive Director of Space ISAC, and here at the Information Sharing and Analysis Center, we have a Watch Center where we're tracking the adversary from ground to space.
Yep.
Now, what that means is that we are actively working with industry. We have over 100 members, and we have many government partners to share and correlate information around threats and vulnerabilities across different domains. And our primary objective is to increase the overall security posture for the global space community. And we heavily rely on Australia as a key partner of the Watch Center through our Australia Global Hub to do the 24/7 follow the sun approach that our analysts use here.
Well, that term is something we've heard a number of times, particularly at the symposium, as well as the follow the sun. As you say, it does bring Australia in as a key partner. The segments of space. I mean, space cyber is a unique domain. Most space companies still have their own cybersecurity requirements, but the space domain makes cyber a little bit more challenging, as well as the legacy sort of systems that are up there as well. Given the number of years that Space ISAC is going, as you say, 100 odd members, how fast and rapidly is this changing for you? And even at the symposium, you had a number of announcements, so you really are developing quite quickly, and if anything, building momentum.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, yeah. When we first started in 2019, the White House asked for the stand-up of the Watch Center and the Space ISAC, and we were just in the early stages of recognizing that these threats are not all classified because the information is generated from the commercial sector. Yep. They own the attack surface in large part. So over 90% of our space systems are managed, owned, and operated by commercial or industry or academia. We have defense and IC companies as our members, and they work closely with governments around the world, but the governments don't own as much of the infrastructure as they once did. So now what we do is we work with the Australians, the Brits, and the EU countries, as well as the Japanese, to do follow the sun. And that means these companies have security professionals that are awake when we're not awake. Yep. As Americans, and we're partnered together to observe and monitor, detect, and share threat information.
And it's active all the time. The other one, in terms of, you've also introduced monitoring subsea cable detections or interference as well as space weather. Just on top of you, I can see sort of images of the sun and monitoring space weather. All of that again creates sort of that unique environment. The subsea cables naturally relates to satellite communications as well, and a change as we lose a cable increases traffic across sort of satellite communications and the like. How do you see this developing for Space ISAC? You're going to stay within the space domain, but there's other areas that you can expand on, and even during symposium, signing agreements with iLaunch, for example, in terms of the amount of sort of the threat environment for space. It's not just cyber necessarily, it's the operating environment itself.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on. You are right. Yeah, we launched our Testbeds and Proving Grounds program late last year, and we partnered with iLaunch so that we could do more testing of these space systems to accelerate space capability and have more flight-proven capability more quickly. But all along the way, we're still tracking ground link, spacecraft, launch, and user threats and vulnerabilities. And a key aspect to this is addressing the holistic space system. So we're not just thinking of it as the space domain and what's in space, we're thinking of all of the connectivity. So therefore, undersea cables and their connection to the ground infrastructure and the observations of what the adversary is doing, all of this matters. Our Watch Center analysts are tracking the adversary from ground to space, but they're really tracking it from subsea to space, because the undersea cables and the cable cutting activities, there's been at least 7 cable cuts in quarter 1 of 2025, and these signal to us that there may be pivoting across the different domains, and we should be looking for adversarial activity in space, interference, jamming, hacking. The edge devices are very susceptible, as well as the software and the supply chain. So all of that story put together, including the space weather activities, is really what we're after, to develop that comprehensive, timely, actionable threat intel reporting for the watch.
You had a session today at the symposium that I attended, and one of the things you mentioned was obfuscation of space weather events versus cyber events. Is that something you just sort of wargaming yourself, or are you finding that that's something that actually you have observed?
So what we observe is that there's a number of space weather activities that can manifest and look like cyber activity or interference events.
Yep.
And the challenging part about that is that if there were to be a cyber attack that occurs or significant interference that occurs, sometimes it is hard to differentiate between space weather and nefarious activity. And so our goal is always to report to our owner operators, and what we're doing now is we're moving towards having a we're moving towards having a space weather truth data set.
Right.
And what that allows for is the analysts that work with these owner operators, they're able to inform the space operators when a space weather event is occurring and be able to discern whether or not it was truly space weather or potentially it was actually something more nefarious.
The other thing is significant events that happen around the world tend to have cyber-related activity. Something that came up, there was a number of key dates that you raised last year from some of your sessions. I think it was around May 8th or something, where there was significant, or 6 I think they called, significant incident events. Mm-hmm. Those patterns, the amount of activities, the number of threat actors that are operational as well, I suppose from a public viewpoint, how much perception should they have of how active this domain is and the number of threat actors? So how active is this environment on a day-to-day basis?
I would recommend that the public becomes more educated and increasingly aware of the number of cyber attacks there are from nation-state actors and non-nation-state actors against our critical infrastructure. So it's not limited to just space systems. We have a lot of adjacent and interconnected technologies. We see 5G is continuously interfacing with space systems. Space systems are interfered with by 5G signals, as well as space systems promote more use of 5G. So as we adopt more Internet of Things capabilities, we're going to see a lot of inadvertent interference, and the reversible effects of that interference makes it so it can be negligible in some cases. But when it starts to become an impact, direct impact on the mission, like we see with GNSS interference, now we need to really start taking this to the next level of protection, because the resiliency of our missions depend on our ability to protect against the significant number of interference events occurring. And
I suppose the other thing is something, again, from the symposium, you see how exciting the space industry is. Mm-hmm. You understand how critical cyber is, but the Artemis missions going to the moon and to Mars, the longevity of the Space ISAC, not just here on Earth, but obviously into new planetary bodies as well. That is also on the roadmap, I take it, for Space ISAC, and sort of there's definitely, visiting here at the Watch Center, there's room to grow here in terms of your monitoring.
Absolutely. Yeah, so in the Watch Center, we are definitely considering cislunar infrastructure as part of our scope. I should come up with a way to say undersea cables to the moon,
yeah, that's
but
right.
to Mars as well. I mean, it's the universe. So even the Deep Space Network is within scope of the Space ISAC. Our new partnership that we just announced with NASA, we're working together on all things cybersecurity, information sharing, and with cislunar, our partnership with NASA is going to become even more important as we're building infrastructure on and around the moon. We're really thrilled to run a series of exercises that focuses on cislunar. Right. This year, we will go to Adelaide and we will run a crisis simulation exercise, again, focusing on cislunar. This time, we're going to be bringing it down to the level of the Security Operations Center and the Space Operations Center, yep, and making it very hands-on. So the incident responders can actually use the tools within our tabletop exercise to be able to respond. They'll receive the threat information from the Watch Center. It will show up on their screens. They'll have to have their laptop in hand, and then work through the geopolitical dynamics of a cislunar attack. or attack on cislunar infrastructure.
Well, I suppose that underlines just how not only where humans are actually going, and we will be on the moon not the too distant future, but also the future of the Space ISAC and the importance of what you do. You've just mentioned Adelaide, a great segue to close here. We will see you in Adelaide at the Space Cyber Forum, it's the third forum. We saw you there for the first time last year, and you have a number of agreements in Australia. But Erin Miller, the Executive Director with Space ISAC, thank you so much for hosting us today here at the Watch Center in Colorado Springs, and we'll see you in Adelaide in June.
See you there.
Thanks for joining us on Australian Space TV.
Thank you.